it's my great pleasure today to introduce Dr. Luis Moreno-Ocampo. As you read probably on the website, he's the founder, Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, where he served from 2003 to 2012. He was involved in 20 of the most serious conflicts of the 21st century. He was also a prosecutor in the Argentina historic trials to the military juntas and many more, being a first transitional in the first transitional justice models developed in the world. He also worked for Transparency International and taught at Harvard, NYU, Yale, University of Buenos Aires, Hebrew University, Al-Quds University, among others. He is about to publish a book about his experience. But as you know, I always make a personal introduction to the guest. I want to say about him that he didn't pass through life, and he allowed life to happen and see where it would take him, being a privileged participant in historical events, as Tolstoy put it, for those who do make a difference in the world, starting at the trials to the military juntas in Argentina in 1985, but always seeing fortuna and creating at every juncture novel forms to defend rights, as he did with Poder Ciudadano, where we met a few decades ago, all the way to the ICC. He's always been involved in practice, recognizing the power of agency and institutions, navigating nuances and complexities in real time, and letting practice ask the questions and challenge theoretical frameworks and establish powers and notions when the pursuit of justice requires. With all the horror he confronted directly in the face, he's always an optimist and try to look at the positive side. It's an amazing honor to have Luis Moreno-Ocampo here today.
Thank you, Mara. Thank you for your kind words.
So let's start a conversation. I want to ask you a little bit, about your story, because you always say that when you imagine yourself back in the day, you never thought you would do this. How did you start with the military trials in Argentina, and how, that made you just take the path that you did?
Okay, let them tell them about where I'm now. I'm in Malibu. I'm in California too. I'm watching the sea in front of my window. So, and this conversation is a challenge for me because it's connecting my current life. I'm in California watching the sea, beautiful. I'm going to the beach to play volleyball later, so it's lovely. But also, I am representing Syrian victims who were affected by the conflict in Syria, and they are refugee now. And then I live always in these two worlds. And that's why for me, this meeting that Mara and Derek invite me is so important for me, because I like to understand how to present my peculiar experience. Because I'm living in Malibu, I see for me, Malibu is great. I don't need to discuss Syria. I can go to the beach. Why I should be involved in Syria? So that's why for me, I need your advice. I assume you people live in California, you live a good life here. So how to present in the US the global problems? How to present it in a way that we can do something, no? That is my challenge, Mara. So I like to tell my story, but first connect my story with their story, because I need to engage them. I need their advice. In particular, because I think what happened in Argentina in the 70s was not just an Argentinian problem. It was part of the fight against communism, basically. Argentina had guerrillas trained in Cuba. Our army was trained in the US, but also by the French. So our army developed a theory how to do counterinsurgency, basically. And so was they instead to respect the law inside the country, the army treat Argentinian citizens as enemies. And that's a problem. Instead to be criminals, to be prosecuted or investigated, the army believe it should be killed. They should torture them to get information, as you know, happened also in war that US fought, and then decide who will be killed. And that's what they did. And the funny thing, that's why in my experience in Argentina, I learned about the influence of US, because the biggest adversary of the Argentinian generals against communism was Jimmy Carter. And that was the funny thing. Argentinians were doing these crimes in 1976. So a few months after they start, Carter took office. And Carter decided to present human rights as a global issue, to confront the Soviet Union. But Carter, being a rocker, engineer, thinker, was looking for consistency. And then Carter decided to confront not just the Soviets, to confront also right-wing dictatorships. And then Argentinians were the target. So, and that was a funny or crazy thing, because in Argentina, our generals, were fighting communism supported by Moscow against Washington. So, and then when I learned that, I learned, okay, ideas and ideologies are not explaining reality. Reality is much more complex. And that's what I learned when I became the prosecutor in Argentina.
That's a great point, because that touches upon, all the way your experience to the ICC, where you say that there's a fragmented system, there are nuances and complexities, that is not chaos, but complexity. Can you tell us a little bit about, the experience of the ICC? But first, you were the first chief prosecutor. The ICC was a newly created institution. There was no global international system. How did you go about creating it? Everyone was saying you're not going to get anywhere if you do not have US support. Why take the position? It would be great to hear your story about it.
Why take the position? In 2003, I was a visiting professor at Harvard. And I received the offer to be the ICC prosecutor. And a colleague of mine at Harvard told me, Luis, you had to reject it. And why? Why I should reject the offer? He said, look, without US, you cannot investigate crimes. You cannot arrest people. So it will be a shame for you, because you will be 9 years at The Hague doing nothing and receiving a salary. That was his prediction. For me, it was a different feeling, because going back to my Argentinian story, I never was thinking to be a prosecutor. I was a clerk of the Solicitor General, doing basically office work in reviewing Supreme Court decisions, including American Supreme Court decision, because US Constitution is the model of the Argentinian Constitution. So my job in 1984 was a cabinet job. I was also a part-time professor. So I was driving in this ideal world. And suddenly my country decided to investigate the generals. Imagine the impact of Nixon in the US. You investigate Nixon for Watergate. In Argentina, we investigate for the first time in our history the generals for a massive atrocities. So it was a huge thing. It was an incredible thing. The people discussed it during the election times. One of the candidates proposed to investigate the crimes. He won, unexpectedly he won. And then a truth commission was created. And suddenly in 1984, a civil court has to do the case. And the prosecutor requests support. And because I was in the Solicitor General office, they sent me. That was the reason. No big look for, it was me. And I told the prosecutor, look, I never did a case in my life. I was working as advisor on Supreme Court decisions. I never investigated a crime.
Little did you know.
Yeah, and he said, but okay, but you understand the American system. And that's important for us because in Argentina, the judge investigates the crimes, like in Europe, in the old Europe system. So he said, what to do something different. So you have to investigate the crimes in a much more informal way, more dynamic way. And your lack of experience, in fact, is your competitive advantage. Okay, I'm willing. For me, was the work of my dream. I never, there would be never a bigger case in a country, like I prosecuted 9 top generals, 3 of them former presidents, no? So yes, of course I would do. So I organized the investigation and we ran the case. All my life, I was thinking that was the biggest job in my life. I would never have a bigger case. So after that, I stayed as a prosecutor for many years. I do rebellion cases. Then I put my law firm. And then after 9 years in my law firm, I said, okay, money is enough. I will go back to the academy. And then I accepted Stanford University invitation and Harvard. And then they called me. I was parking my car in Buenos Aires. And someone said, look, we are calling you in the name of the Jordanian ambassador. He is the president of the Assembly of State Parties of the ICC. And he's looking for the person to be the prosecutor. And your name, because your experience in Argentina, appeared at top. But we don't know if you like the job. Can you come to New York and meet the Prince Said, the Jordanian ambassador? It was weird. I would say, okay, I'm going to New York in a month. Don't worry, I will be there. We organize. And then I told my wife, I received a crazy phone call offering me to discuss this job. I had no idea of the job. I never requested it. Don't worry, nothing will happen. They will never appoint me because I was very controversial in my country. First I investigated the military guys for the killings. Then I investigated corruption. So I fought with all the politicians. And then as a private lawyer, I represent women, rich women, who were affected by the families in the family company. So I had this crazy experience. I was fighting generals, politicians, and business people in my country. So I think they would never appoint me. I'm very controversial, but it's fine. And the funny thing is, a few months later, I was appointed. So how you going to say, for me, that I saw how the Junta Trial changed life in my country. And I was thinking, maybe we could do the same at the global level. Just to give you an example how the Junta Trial changed life in my country. When the prosecutor appointed me, for 6 months, I had to run the investigation. And in fact, I did not know well how the Argentinian generals run these counterinsurgency activities. So I learned about how they organize a system to abduct people suspects, torture them, get more information, abduct more, then torture them, get information, they produce reports, and they decided without trial who should be killed, who should not be killed. And then for me, it was a learning process. And when I was going to I was 31 in those days. I was going, sometimes I was going to visit my mother at her house, and I never could convince my mother. My mother loved generals. My grandfather was a general. So my mother loved General Videla. She was thinking, oh, Luis, you're wrong. General Videla is a nice guy. I was with him in the church. He's very respectful. And he was protecting us. Yeah.
Let me qualify that General Videla was the first president, military president who actually pursued the coup d'etat, because maybe people wouldn't know about that. So Andrew's tenure was the most, gruesome
Yes.
part of the disappearance in Argentina.
At the same time, the guy looked very respectable. I can show you a video of him if you like. The guy looked very respectable, very nice, and then my mother loved him. So I could not convince my mother. So I went back to my office and I told my boss, look, we had to win this case in court, but also we had to win this case in society, because even my mother don't believe me and I cannot convince my mother. So, and that's why I learned about the communication produced by trials, because trials is a very respectful process. If you think, there's no way you will be in the same room with the person who killed your father or your daughter, you will not be there, or you will not be in dialogue with the person. And the ritual of the trial allow you to do it. That's why the trial is very interesting place, because the truth is coming from opposite views. So I never convinced my mother, but 2 weeks after the beginning of the hearings, the public hearings, my mother called me and say, I still love General Videla, but you are right, he had to go to jail. So I learned how the trial, it was not just a conviction, it's not just important for the victims, it was very important for normal people. And I believe that is the most important thing.
Sorry, I interrupted. So this point brings you all the way, to the ICC and experience, where you bring kind of the power of trials, not only in terms of institutions and the law, but also as a process to bring, all the parts and the truth to come out, but also as a very powerful tool to educate society. Can you tell us, how did you go about institutionalizing something that was empty with 3 staff people, and what you did, and how did you go about it, and what you think you accomplished?
Okay, the first thing is, in my national experience, I learned about how the mix of national and international, because the Argentinian generals were trained in US, or they import French experts in counterinsurgency to discuss. The guerrillas were trained in Cuba, supported by Moscow. So I saw this international connection with biggest crimes. And then when I was working on corruption issues, any big corruption case has international implications. Money flowing out, going to banks, people doing different things around the world. So I saw
Salute.
no, any big case, any big crime has international dimensions. So when I went to Harvard, I was teaching about that. I was teaching a big course on corruption and a small seminar called How to Establish an International Legal System. For that idea is crazy in the US. In the US lawyers and US experts, they don't believe in international law. There was a senator, Jesse Helms, who very graphically say, there are the American people, American government, and God. Nothing between God and American government. Because the US is a former colony, independent from the biggest empire. So US developed this instinct to be against any international thing. You got to protect your place and your people, no one else. So that's the biggest concept in the US. In Argentina, it's different. In Argentina, our government was killing us. So we needed international protection. That's why in Argentina, the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, who came in 1979, was basically very important, protecting us from our junta. And Jimmy Carter was protecting us from our junta. So Argentinians love international protection. So, and that's normally in many parts of the world. So I saw this tension between colonialism and rejection and imperialism and rejection, but also the need to establish a global protection. Malcolm X, in fact, at the end of his days, was talking about that. Malcolm X say we need to go beyond national system to human rights. Malcolm X was talking about human rights. So, and in fact, Martin Luther King influenced Mandela. So these international connections are clear in some people, but it's not mainstream in the US. In the US, it's about national law. And that's why when finally I received the offer, I saw the opposition of the US. And it was funny because I have, this was 2003, I was appointed in April. And so I had friends in the US government, was Bush in those days. One of my friends was a Stanford professor. I met him in Stanford. He's a very nice guy, and he was working with Kony Rice. And he told me, Luis, I will organize a meeting between you and Kony to discuss how to manage these issues. And he never answered back to me. So another friend who was going to join the White House called me very proudly, say, look, Luis, I'm in the White House now. I'm very powerful. Whatever you need, let me know. So, well, in fact, I will need your help. Can you help me to establish connection with the US government? Because I will be the ICC prosecutor, and I like to have a good, I understand US is not a member, but I like to have a good interaction. Of course, Luis, don't worry. I will do it in a second. 3 days later, he called me and said, Luis, where are you working? I happened to meet 3 times. I stopped someone and I told him, look, I have a friend of mine who is the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. And when I mentioned the International Criminal Court, the person stopped talking to me and turned and left me talking alone. Where are you working? It's Kurt's place. So I learned that. I remember finally, I talked to a lawyer who was a former legal advisor of the State Department. And he was very nice. And he said, look, Luis, we know you. We know you will do a good job, but that is bad for us. We don't like to provide legitimacy to the International Criminal Court. So expect nothing from us. So that what for me was great. I should have no expectation from the US and focus on the state who were a member of the ICC. Who were they? They were from all South America, who inherited these human rights violations in the fight against communism. All Africa led by Mandela. Mandela took office in 1995. So in 1998, Mandela was leading the African countries to join the ICC. And Europe, because Europe suffered the Second World War, and the Balkans. So these were the 3 regions leading, plus Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And UK, who was against, but changed because the Minister of Foreign Affairs was a very nice guy. So suddenly, the planet aligned, and these were my constituencies. And my point was, okay, can these small countries lead a global change? I had no idea. But I said, okay, what I should do is to establish the best possible institution, respecting absolutely the legal limits, because I was not an activist. I was a lawyer implementing an office who has no benchmark. Do you know how many times the UN Charter mentioned the possibilities of international justice? Do you know how many times? 10, 20, 5? Okay. Check, someone in the audience know, send a chat, please. How many times the UN Charter mentioned the possibilities of international justice? The answer is 0.
0.
0. The UN Charter, adopted in June 1945, is based on the idea of national sovereignty. It's to protect national sovereignty. So criminal justice is like the flag and the currency, a critical part of national sovereignty. Therefore, there is no mention of international justice. But the funny thing, and that's showing how we are evolving in a no-linear way, in June 1945, in San Francisco, in your city, the UN Charter was adopted. 2 months later, in August 1945, in London, the Nuremberg Charter was adopted. So the decision to do justice, international justice, for the first time was at Nuremberg, for Nuremberg, and in contradiction with the UN system, in fact. And in fact, it's funny, you know who was the champion of creating Nuremberg trials? So there were 3 leaders: Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin. Who was the champion? Stalin. I'm so sorry to say, Stalin. So Churchill and Roosevelt agreed in Quebec in 1944 to just kill the leaders. And Stalin, who understood what I learned with my mother, Stalin understood the communication aspect of the trials. Stalin killed all the revolutionaries on the 1917 through trials called the Moscow trials. In the 30s, Stalin used torture his comrades, forced them to confess, then went to trial, they were convicted. That's what he basically executed all his former friends. And Stalin went the same with the Nazis. So Nuremberg was, when we believe the world is linear, no, the world is full of contradictions. Nuremberg was against the UN Charter, who was adopted at the same moment, and the champion of Nuremberg was Stalin. So, but now is a sacred cow. Now the beginning of the world, because Nuremberg exposed the crimes and exposed the Holocaust. Another issue. Political things, trials, are connected with communication. When the word Holocaust appeared with capital letter? In 1961, not in 1945. Nuremberg trials were in 1945, but the word Holocaust became capital letter, meaning the killing of the Jewish community, in 1961. Why? What happened there? 2 things happened. One, there was a TV show called the Eichmann Trial. A group, 2 American Jews, a producer and a director, filmed the Eichmann case in Jerusalem and disseminated around the world. Not through the internet, because there was no internet, but they just tape it and copy by plane, and then 1 hour each week in 28 countries. And therefore, that was changing Germany. Germany changed because the Eichmann trial dissemination through this is a movie called The Eichmann Show, showing that phenomenon. And the decision, the conviction of Eichmann was December 61. The same week, December 61, a movie called Judgment at Nuremberg with Spencer Tracy, Judy Garland, Burt Lancaster, all the big actors, Montgomery Clift, was premiered in Berlin. So the same week, Eichmann was convicted, the TV show exposed it, and the movie Judgment Nuremberg present Nuremberg. And that was the beginning of the war Holocaust with capital letter. And the process was consolidated 17 years later with a TV series called Holocaust with Meryl Streep. So the Meryl Streep miniseries consolidate Holocaust. And now whatever they say is there in stone, it's clear, Holocaust is Holocaust. So what I learned in my life is that life is not just about legal decisions, it's about political process, it's about communication, and suddenly, boom, you consolidate that. And okay, that's what I learned before going to the ICC, and then when I was appointed, my job, I went to The Hague, I received 6 floors in a building in the corner of an avenue called Maanweg, in the border of the Hague, and 6th floor empty, 2 employees, 1 assistant. That was my office. I had 18 judges waiting for my cases. So, and I need to, and I have NGOs asking me immediate cases. And then Bush was intervening Iraq. Because the occupation of Iraq started in March 2003, and I started my job in June 2003. So everyone was asking me to prosecute Bush. I cannot, because to be part of my investigation, the state has to sign the treaty creating the International Criminal Court.
So let me clarify that at the time of your appointment, the US, Russia, and China were not part of the treaty, and the treaty was the Rome Statute. So at the end of your tenure, these three countries had signed recognizing actually the legitimacy of the court.
No, they never signed. No. They never signed. The US, Russia, and China never signed. The issue is they respect the court. That was my job. My job was to transform a promise into reality. That was my job. And at the beginning, I can show you videos, a debate. I was very proud. In 2004, George Bush was debating with Kerry in the election, and Bush was alerting about an unaccountable ICC prosecutor with me, affecting US interests. So my office in those days had 30 people, that's it. And the most powerful president in the world was afraid of me. That was a funny thing. But so the US, China, no big country won the ICC, because it's like in the school, the big guys don't need teachers helping them. The weak guys need teachers helping to stop the bullying. The bullying is, so if you're a big guy, you don't need the law. You need the law when you're weak. And therefore, it's normal. ICC is a creation of the weakest countries, the countries who understood violence in the 90s. It was a moment where the end of the Cold War and the beginning of this war on terror. So there was a window if you see long picture, you see World War II ended with a UN charter establishing negotiation process and the Nuremberg Charter. So these are the combinations. War, negotiations, and justice was the beginning after the end of the Second World War. Justice appeared during the Cold War. During the Cold War, justice would disappear. When the Cold War ended, the Balkans were inflamed, and therefore, some hypocrisy, creation of the Yugoslavia Tribunal. Then, 1984, Rwanda genocide, real genocide. We should do something about it, Tribunal for Rwanda. And therefore, 1998, the Rome Statute adopted, creating International Criminal Court. That's it. When I was appointed, this window was closed because the war on terror started. But Bush was creating reaction with the Iraq war. So even the time changed, people were still supporting our office. And in my time, Bush, who started against me, had to end his term supporting me. Because in 2008, I was investigating Darfur genocide. And then we first investigate, okay, that's a good example how negotiations and justice work together. Let me explain what happened. When I took office, I had to, first I established my teams, and I decided, okay, I could not do Iraq, because Iraq is not a party. I cannot do US. So I would choose the most serious crimes. I will inform very quickly. I'm not doing Iraq, nor US, but I had to say, okay, I'm doing this. So we have a small team, but we selected Congo and Colombia were the two gravest crimes committed under our jurisdiction. But in Colombia, they were doing national investigations. And that I had to respect. When the country is conducting national investigation, the ICC should not intervene. The ICC intervened when nothing happened. So Colombia was conducting investigations, Congo could not, because Congo was coming from a big civil war, what they call the African War. And therefore, we choose Congo and then Uganda. And because we did Congo and Uganda, when the world discussed the Darfur conflict in 2005, France lead. Okay, that maybe we can discuss it. No, okay. Yes, France, who was furious with the US because of the Iraq intervention, was able to galvanize the support of the Security Council member. And that's also interesting. Why? How France could galvanize support to force the US to accept the international criminal court intervention in Darfur. Two aspects. First, nationally in the US, there was a coalition between religious leaders protecting minorities in the South against Islamic work. So they also, they hate Darfur, they hate Bashir, so they were supporting Darfur. And people, students led by Samantha Power book, A Prayer from Hell Against Genocide, and Jewish community say this is a genocide. So this combination created a strong constituency in the US. And Colin Powell led them, requesting intervention, requesting justice in Darfur. And France took advantage of it, and it galvanized the Security Council member. And that's where how political change, because you know, at the Security Council, there are 15 states, and it's difficult to change the rules, but 9 of the 15 were members of the ICC. The US called the ICC 9. So France galvanized the 9 and get majority. With 8 votes, you win. And Russia, Philippines, and Japan supported. So suddenly China and US were isolated. So Bush had to veto or accept. Therefore, Bush make a negotiation, accepted. So suddenly, in 2 years, we received a Security Council resolution referring Darfur case to us. That was absolutely unexpected. I remember when we were planning our activities, I recruit someone with diplomatic experience, because I got zero, as you see, I have zero diplomatic experience. I am a monster on diplomacy. And she asked her, okay, how we can Security Council resolution, because it would be nice to start our cases in connection with Security Council. And she said, Luis, you have no idea. You have 9 years tenure, you will receive no Security Council referral. She was right, I was wrong. But things changed so fast. 2 years later, we received a Security Council referral with US and China abstaining, Russia supporting. And the funny thing, in 2011, when Gaddafi was killing people in Libya, the 15 countries, including China, US, referred the situation to me. So in my time, we moved from be marginal to be mainstream, supported by everyone. Then the Libya and the Syria conflict make the court more in conflict again. That is a different story. So, okay, I'm diverting. What is your question?
Yeah, no, what I wanted just to do a little like tighten it. So basically you were working within the UN Security Council framework, within also the Rome Statute, but what you point out in previous of your book that I've seen, actually, your upcoming book, that you know the Rome Statute was in conflict with national laws. So the system is fragmented. Your challenge was how to, you know, build a global, basically, you know, a global system, right, from a dispersed, you know, global community, protecting the right of victims and navigating national interest, right, in a context in which the law, there was no hierarchy, but there were very competing normative frameworks. Would you talk about that and how you navigated this? And if you can later, you know, go to the court, between what you mentioned previously, you know, the tension between the Rome Statute and the war on terror, and what you call, you know, the contradiction between criminal enemy that we have discussed, you know, previously, you know, in the conversatory.
Okay. At this time, I believe everyone is lost. I think I confuse everyone in the audience. Oh my God. Okay. I was a first global public servant, independent, because Kofi Annan, Secretary General in the UN, is just helping the states to manage the conflict. The first time a global public servant was independent was me. So that is my tension. I need to explain to people the meaning of that. And to understand that, you need to understand law is a mechanism to manage conflict. The idea to protect the life of citizens started in Athens, 5 centuries before Jesus Christ. However, then in Athens, no Athenian citizen could be killed without a trial. That was the beginning. However, the protection was within the borders of the city. Outside the city, Athens had no mercy. Athens killed people with no mercy. So to see this, make the story about Minos and Athens. So basically, Athens was started the idea, but the protection was confined to citizens inside Athens, within the confines of the city. To expand the protection, the right from cities to state, it took 22 centuries. Okay, took 22 centuries to move from city protection to national state protection. And the American Revolution developed that concept even more, establishing a constitution, a Bill of Rights, and the idea to be, you cannot be affected, you have basic rights. For me, the 21st century is demanding something more. We are demanding do something bigger, not just national, it had to be global. And that's normal. I don't know, people feel it's crazy, but in the 19th century, in the US, who protects you? State authorities, city authorities. There was no federal criminal justice system. You remember Bonnie and Clyde movie, Bonnie and Clyde were escaping, crossing the border between the states. So FBI was created in 1908 to control crimes who were beyond the borders of the states. And 21st century is similar. We need to have some institutions to protect us from climate change, pandemics. You see, in the pandemics, no one is in charge. City make decisions, state make decisions, governors, presidents, global institutions. So, and the problem is, suddenly a virus in Africa come to us. So we are no global solution for global problems. And the ICC was the first idea to establish a global solution for global crimes.
Right, but it still couldn't deal with this tension that you alluded before, and I asked you, between the criminal and the enemy,
Yeah.
Because when there is no global system, there is no citizen of the world, as much as, you know, a lot of courses and universities are saying, let's be citizens, you know, of the world. The fact that is, we go back to Arendt, you know, the right to have rights is attached to a political community that is national.
Yeah.
And those who are outside that national community are either foreigners in the best of the cases, or enemies who are target of killing without due justice, particularly in the context of the war on terror. Could you speak to the war on terror vis-a-vis this tension between criminal and enemy?
Well, Yeah, that's the point. When in 1998, still in the 90s, the world was changing. The idea is we're a global community, and justice was prevailing in Balkans, in Rwanda. So the idea was doing the ICC. But this concept changed in 2001 as a reaction to the worst attack in the US since Pearl Harbor. The US started the war on terror. And that transformed the paradigm, because the funny thing is, bin Laden could be treated as a criminal. In fact, bin Laden was already indicted in the US. So US can just send troops to arrest him, and that's it, not occupying Afghanistan. US could prosecute, and it's funny, it's not about you did not need international court because the crimes were committed against US people in the US soil. So a prosecutor from New York or Washington could indict bin Laden or even the Taliban involved in the crimes, if they were, and just send troops to arrest him, not to occupy the country. So that was the normal solution. But the US was affected by this, and instead of treat bin Laden as a criminal, treat him as an enemy, and decided to go to war. And that was a really, really majority decision. You know, in the Senate, the idea to go to war was adopted like 98 against 0. In the House, I think it was 420 against 1.
Barbara Lee.
Barbara Lee, my hero, she's the only one who stand and say, no, that's wrong. So, but it was 420 against 1, that's it. And then, it's funny because until that moment, until September 11, 2001, international terrorism was a law enforcement activity. Since then, the main theme is war, and it's failing. But that for me is the biggest problem. I spent 5 years at Harvard, and they are not discussing options. So Bush created the war on terror without thinking, ignoring the lesson from Vietnam, ignoring the lesson from Afghanistan. The US Army evaluated that the Soviets invade Afghanistan, ignoring the Vietnam lessons, and ignoring that the only thing that put together the tribes in Afghanistan were the occupation by non-believers. And that was happened to Soviet Union in the 80s, and happened to the US after, the same. So everyone knew what happened, and we fell in the trap. You see Rambo 3, in Rambo 3, Rambo fight against the Soviets with the Taliban. Rambo is working with the Taliban against the Soviets. So the Taliban was promoted by US. Bin Laden was accepted by US, was financed by Saudi Arabia. So that's what I see. We ignore the real thing. We just follow some ideas. Believe me, oh, it's stronger to be enemy than criminal. No, criminal is much better than enemy. It's respectful and it's more efficient. But now mainstream is war. And for me, okay, one of the reasons I like this conversation, that's why I'm very angry with myself, because I'm thinking I'm going, no clarity, going everywhere. But for me, it would be great to understand the people participating in this debate, in this conversation, what they think, how we can present now that the US needs a different approach. Because the war on terror is failing, but we don't know that. We are not talking about that.
So Luis, this is a great point. And if I, tighten this, you also discuss, Samuel Moyne's Humane, which actually deals with, the main argument being, how by making wars more humane within the conduction of war, but not questioning the reasons as to why, we go to war. We are actually perpetuating in time and space, war, as opposed to thriving, right, for peace. And in this moment, there's a seminal moment that you mark, and that is when Obama received the Nobel Prize, and the speech he gives. If you would want to share the speech and talk about it in terms of, you know, what you are presenting, that the international problem vis-a-vis the enforcement of law is, it would be great for the audience, I think.
Well, let me introduce the problem first, because what I see is the Bush improvised a solution without thinking, and I could understand that. But 7 years later, Obama took office, and he received no new plans. I think it's a huge failure of the expert community. The people at university are not providing to politicians, to political leaders, options. Obama took office and had to improvise his options. He's smart, eloquent, so he basically was against the Iraq war and thinking the Afghanistan war was the right war. And then he basically consolidated the Afghanistan war. And that's why, yes, in 2009, he spent many hours discussing with the army and his cabinet what to do in Afghanistan, and he reluctantly accepted to increase the number of soldiers that Petraeus was demanding. And he basically promoted a debate. When he received the Nobel Prize, it's interesting because basically he consolidated the idea that he can use war not just to defend the country, which is the concept accepted. He presented the idea that war could be launched for humanitarian reasons, and that is not legal. That is wrong. That was a 17th century concept, and Obama went there, and therefore, and he implemented in Syria. So I think one of the problems in the US is that Obama represents people opposed to Bush concept. But the Obama position, instead to go to the war, was just on torture and on Iraq, not on war. And then basically Obama, American Civil Liberty Union call it, Obama consolidate the new normal. And that way for me is complicated because I think that's a big thing in the world today. My book is about that, but I'm not American, so I don't know how to present this in a way that American people can do something on that. It's not about saying that, how to replace the war on terror for a different approach to control international violence. We need that, but we need a critical mass of experts on that, and we need political leaders on that, because Obama was driving in the wrong direction. So that is for me the biggest question for the audience. How to present that? What do you think about that? How to present that Obama is a nice guy, but is wrong on this way? And who could be the new leadership? Because basically now the new leaders in the US are talking about national issues. They're not talking about international issues. And in the meantime, the war on terror continue, even without occupation.
But that requires like a tectonic shift in the way that Americans, and I'm not American, you know, either, in the way they think, right? And this, you know, opening of this conversatory on rights around the world, you know, goes in that direction. I mean, the challenge, and I want to hear your thoughts about this, the challenge for me is to be able to single out dimensions, right? When we criticize a person such as Obama, who, you know, was the first Black president, and the fact that, you know, you're criticizing how he consolidated, you know, the war on terror, says nothing about, you know, other accomplishments or other substantial and meaningful, you know, accomplishments that he might have, you know, had. You know, that's.
I think we need to live in a new world with we cannot rule the 21st century as Roman Empire. So we need an international system based on the network. So each piece doing this part. And so probably we cannot have a global design adopted by a global group. So it will be a messy, but we need to implement solutions, understanding that the solution should be global. And probably we need technology, because we are living in a brutal transformation of technology and communication. So we need to understand that. So basically, I think we need 10 years or understanding and creating new technologies and engaging young people and engaging experts. But people like the audience today could really lead in this transformation and this education process. We need to change how we are approaching these issues. And it's funny, because for me, the US is the model, because the US is a country built on the idea of respect individuals. It's a country built on the idea of respect states. So the federal system had to respect both individuals' rights and state rights. And the global system had to be similar. It could not be one global empire or 10 global empires. It should be a global system where national interests and citizen interests are respected. That's it. That's the concept. And in fact, Theodore Roosevelt said that. In 1910, Theodore Roosevelt accepted the Nobel Prize, and he said that he was trying to export the US model to similar US model to the global sphere. But 100 years later, Obama was back. Obama was presenting the idea of US will be the global nice empire, the bending empire, and that is not working. That failed. And then, yeah.
No, I wanted to ask you, yes, and I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are about, the humane war that Obama consolidated, and then, for example, Samuel Moyn discusses at length in his books together with his diagnosis, whether you agree that you seem to agree.
I don't know how much people in the audience know Samuel Moyn, probably not a lot. Samuel Moyn is a professor at Yale, history basically, and he's like a critical study guy. He criticizes conservatives and liberals at the same time. That's why it's controversial and it's funny, because he discussed Obama. He in his book, he mentioned Obama double more times than all the other presidents together, because he believed Obama was basically leading a transformation that moved to consolidation of the old model. So that's why he's making the point, and he's right and things so. But also he challenged the conservative, because he believed US should not be an hegemonic power. So that's why the book is interesting. But as a good critical study guy, he's not proposing any solution. He just likes to criticize. Fine. So that's why, yeah, I shared with Mara, I'm preparing a debate on his book. And yes, it's fun. But also, the problem is, Obama is a nice guy. We don't need to focus on Obama. We need new policies and a group of people presenting new policies. That I think we should do. It's not about individuals. Obama did what he could. But for me, the real shame is the academy is not presenting options. It's not presenting new ideas. And that's why maybe this group could help to present the different ideas. I came to Los Angeles because I was fed up with Harvard. National security is so important for them, they cannot see something bigger. Harvard, they did a planification for the next 10 years, and they are very smart, so they're smart people. So they define very nicely the niche for Harvard Kennedy School is to establish how artificial intelligence could create public good. How artificial intelligence could be used for public purpose. That was the concept, and I love it. It's great. So I said, okay, great idea. But if you are promoting an app to solve a health problem or security problem, it should not be an American app. It's a global app to help problems in Guatemala and India. Oh, no, no, Luis, we are America. Hey, no, guy, it will not work. We need a global solutions. They cannot do that. That's why I came to Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, I'm teaching at the USC Cinematic Arts because movies are global. So I'm trying to understand how movies can help to create a new thinking, because expert will not do it.
So it's great that you're saying that. It's like individuals, it's not about individuals, it is about models and regimes. And we didn't get to discuss, the differential regimes, but it's also about individual agency. The people who participate, in the events like you, and it's also about communication. So I'm very much looking forward to the publication, of your books. And I'm going to move to the questions from the audience, Luis, si te parece?
Oh yeah, please. I think they had to rescue us because I completely lost. I think no one can follow what I'm saying. Yes, please help us to organize this conversation, to summarize this. Basically, okay, maybe 1 minute to summarize. I was investigating massive atrocities in my country, in Argentina. I learned about that, how to investigate massive crimes. That's why I was appointed Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. I conducted investigation there. We were involved in 17 different countries. We ended charging Gaddafi, President Bashir, the President of Cote d'Ivoire. So we did our job. But the problem is, justice internationally is confronting a different model, the war on terror. And both models, war on terror and justice, are influencing national states. So that's why the game is so complex. So yes, we need to understand the game to understand what we can do. So agency depends on the game you are. So that's why when they appoint me as the prosecutor, they give me an incredible space. And now my job is to translate to normal people who understand what he's talking about. Yeah.
So on that note, thank you for the recap. So Douglas Kenning asks, can you explain more about the basis of international law principles, Roman law, English law? Can you explain jus cogens and how this is defined and agreed? That's one question, and then we'll move to the next. And I encourage the audience to send in more questions.
Okay. So, yeah, normally in law, you have two traditions, common law and civil law. UK created a common law idea where basically the law is for people. And that's why you have juries. And that model was exported to the US. And I love it because it's a system where basically the law is for the people, the jury decide. In the civil law traditions, is influenced by the Inquisition, where the law was in the hands of the Catholic Church, who can torture people to decide whatever they want. And the Enlightenment Revolution in France was not about giving power to people, it was giving power to the parliament. So the parliament became the most important power, and then the judges had to do what the parliament say. So in the civil law systems, the issue is not the people, the issue is more how some officers interpret the law. So that's a classic distinction, but in both cases, law is national. Law is national, because basically the concept was the law is a national sovereignty issue. So even the UN Charter established a model to help the states to make negotiations between them, but the law is just aspirations, because there are many international treaties and human rights conventions adopted since 1945, but at the end of the day, the authority to implement or not is at the mercy of the national authorities. So that's it. That's why in the US, they believe international law is not law, because it's just aspiration, but the only thing is stay with power, do whatever they want. That's it. That is the normal way. If not, you say, oh no, international law has to be respected, but yes, but they are aspirations. Who implement them? So that's why the Rome Statute creating the International Criminal Court make a big change, because who can start investigation? States can do it, Security Council can do it, but, and that's the novelty and the biggest debate at Rome in 1998, the prosecutor could decide independently where and when to start an investigation. That is a quantic transformation. It's an amazing. So that's why when you talk about agency, at Nuremberg, the prosecutor had no agency to go to investigate Japanese court or Russian crimes. No. The system was just Nazi crimes. ICC is different. They gave me agency to decide to go to Congo, Colombia, or Uganda, or Argentina, or Germany. So I have this ability. So the system defines your possibilities. No. So basically, that's why the ICC is a different legal system. The war on justice is also based on law. The idea, yes, a country can use its army to defend itself. And normally, a country defends itself against other states. But in the September 11, US decided you can be at war with groups like Al-Qaeda, which is not a state, or individuals. So it was a new, different type of war. In a war not against state, with no territory, and with no legal, no time limits. In this sense, it's different. And Iraq was a different problem, because Iraq was about making war with a false pretext, saying, oh, it's a preemptive war, because Iraq would disseminate chemical weapons to terrorists and they would attack us. So we had to preempt that. Condi Rice said very nicely, she's very smart, she said very nicely, we don't like the smoking gun prove a mushroom cloud. No? So that's what she said. But it was a lie. They had nothing in Iraq. And Syria was what Obama defined as humanitarian war. An humanitarian war to protect against the chemical weapons. And that's why the world is going to. And then after Syria, Obama killed 8 times more people than Bush using drones, but then he also using more proxy forces. Now proxy forces are on the world, and everyone is supporting proxy forces. So the world is a mess, because Steven Pinker showed the monopoly of violence is the most important violence reducer. So affecting monopoly of violence is crucially important. And so common law or civil law are details almost. We are talking about basic. Is law establishing obligation for individuals at the global level? That's the ICC.
And groups, as you mentioned. Sorry? And groups also.
And?
Groups.
Well. ICC is about individuals. ICC is, if you kill individuals, you could be investigated. Even if you are managing a group or a state, you can be investigated too. Yeah. But, and the war on terror is the idea, okay, you can kill people and you decide who is the enemy and who will be killed. And the legal opinion is US does not need to provide a target with any right. You can go and kill, that's it. And the problem is, it's a life or death, but it's life for Americans and death for foreigners, for aliens. That's the problem. Look, in Iraq, 207,000 people die. No, most of them not by American troops. So US is not responsible for many of these deaths, but is responsible for launching the war. That was the more good point. US is worried about the war crimes and torture, but not about the crime of war. And that is the main issue. It's not so much about war crime, it's about crime of war. That is the problem. But as soon you believe the war is protecting you, you don't care.
Right, and that's the main point, to come across, that when we focus on war crimes and make them more humane, with drones and kind of surgical, killings, even though they're still killings, we forget the moral and legal justifications, right, for why we go to war. This is an issue that Michael Walzer, the public intellectual, already, developed, in 77, and just wars, even though he thinks that, more humane wars eventually will lead to less war. And that's the opposite of what, you and Moyne says. We have more questions.
But if I could, if you want to know more about this issue, when war could be accepted or not, is a beautiful book called The Internationalists by Ona Hathaway and Scott Shapiro. Develop explaining how, and it's interesting because explaining how a pact called the Brian Kellogg Pact, 1928, really prohibit war, and was promoted by a lawyer from US, individual. That's why it's a beautiful story, because it's showing how individuals can make changes. So, yeah.
Great point. I'm going to share it with the audience in an email. So Robert Tolan questions is, what should the US reaction to 9/11? What should the US reaction to 9/11 have been?
Look, imagine 9/11, and then you say, Osama bin Laden is involved in these crimes, will expand the charges against him because he's already indicted, but also will indict the member of the Taliban government who supported Osama bin Laden. And then we will implement the arrest warrant through our army. We send special forces and arrest him. That would, and then you have them arrested or killed in action, and you do justice for the victims of September 11, and you save $6 trillion, the life of 4,000 Americans, and the life of 500,000 people, and a mess in the world. So imagine the alternative. It's a great alternative, no?
I would tend to say so.
But we can go back. We can go back to that point, because I think that's a crucial thing. If we treat people as enemies, we believe war is more stronger, and it's not. Criminal justice is the way to avoid retaliation. That is, John McChrystal said. John McChrystal present what he called the insurgency math. He said, there are 10 terrorists in Afghanistan. You kill 2. How many remain? 20. 10 minus 2 equal 20. Why? Because basically killing people, you produce more terrorism. The fathers, the families, the friends of the people killed became terrorists against you. So that's why justice basically is stop retaliation. Imagine in the Floyd case, the conviction of the police officer stopped the conflict, because basically the community is in charge and say it's not possible, and the police guy became a criminal. Rodney King case, you remember, in Los Angeles 30 years ago, when the police people who beat Rodney King were acquitted, there was a looting and destruction in the country. Yes, justice helped to manage tensions, has justice helped to manage conflict. War exacerbates the conflict, and it's very costly in terms of money and in terms of life. And apparently it was when the US was in Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden was still in Tora Bora, and apparently there was a decision not to arrest him, let him go.
It's interesting, that so many kind of founding tensions of this country, but one of them in the country of allegedly, the rule of law. When the chips are down, it's the rule of retaliation, right?
No, Mara, no, you're wrong. Internally, you will respect the law.
For some people. For some people.
Well, but when the police guy killed Floyd, everyone was furious, and then the guy ended in jail. So sometimes it's difficult, but you can request the implement to law. In Iraq, when you kill people, even by mistake, it's fine.
No, that I understand. That I understand, you know, but
it's a huge difference. When you treat people as criminal enemy, when you attack Floyd as he was an enemy, it's wrong. In the US, it's wrong, and everyone understands that, and the police officer had to go to jail. When you attack by mistake people in Baghdad Square, I'm sorry, it's a mistake, no problem.
Yeah, but that's a leadership, not society. So there are different levels in which different arguments take place. I mean, I don't want to take more, but I mean, I would love to continue this conversation. I understand, you know, the point that the enemy abroad is invisible, right? So therefore superfluous. And if it's not okay to kill it, like I don't see it, and the establishment supports it.
No, in the establishment, no one cares about. There is a great philosopher in Chicago, Italian origin, called Carlo Ginzburg. He explained nicely how distance in time and space reduce our moral ability. And the question is, you receive 2 magic bells. Each time you ring the bells, you got whatever you want in that moment. However, a Chinese Mandarin died in China. No one knows that he died because you ring the bell, but you know. So your moral dilemma is, what goods are you willing to constrain to avoid the death of the old Chinese Mandarin? And in Père Goriot, one of the characters saying Père Goriot, oh, I'm so bad, I killed 30 Chinese Mandarin today. So distance in time and space reduce our moral ability. On Monday, a friend of mine was leading a case against Facebook for involvement in the Burma conflict. It's a genocide in Burma. At the same time, in London, a father killed his son, 6-year-old son. So my friend has a problem because all the newspapers were about the 6-year-old kid killed, not the genocide in Burma. Distance in space reduce our moral ability. So it's normal. That's why when people are killed abroad, we don't get at home.
Yes. No. Yes.
It's not a problem. Yes, Mara, maybe you are different. You are not American. But no, you are abroad.
I can't extend that sweeping generalization, you know, to all Americans. But the issue for me is just to find the venues to channel that concern for the world in ways that are productive for change, basically.
It's not about America. Every part of the world, people will think about their own community. Having a feeling for the global community is complicated. So that's why we need something different. It cannot be about feeling. It should be a mechanism, an app, something.
An app.
Yeah, I always think we need a Tinder app of genocide, yes. Because, you know, the Tinder idea, the guy who invented Tinder realized that women reject 99% of the candidates, men. So, and this guy realized we don't need to see that. If I want to date someone, I need to see the matching, not the rejections. So Tinder basically don't tell you who are rejecting you. Tinder tell you who are accepting you. So it's basically neutralizing negative opinions and consolidate the good opinions. We need something similar on public debates, avoiding the hate speech and putting together people who have. I always say in Israel, the problem is the Israeli moderates are not engaging the Palestinian moderates. So the extremists run the debate. So we need a Tinder genocide Israeli Palestinian app connecting the moderates and moderates from both sides and excluding the extremists. That's what we need. And
I never thought,
yes.
never thought we would come to this analogy. I mean, it's beyond my purview. But
Okay.
let me go.
But what to understand is all the solution will be about up, not about normal things.
Can I ask the last question, Luis?
Yeah,
because I don't want to abuse your time.
Yes. I'm sorry.
So Anne is asking, I agree with the idea of international courts. As an American, we become skeptical about politics interfering with courts. Also, some countries don't think the UN works. So how much are you concerned about politics ruining any international court? That's a great question.
Oh, absolutely. Look, first, you have to make a distinction between UN system and the model of the International Criminal Court. The UN is a place to facilitate diplomatic negotiations. It's a place to debate. It's not a real organization. Samantha Power wrote something very fun. She said, blaming the UN for the lack of security in the world is like blaming the Madison Square Garden because the Knicks are playing bad basketball. Okay? It's a place. The UN is a place. It's not an institution that integrates the states. It's a place to meet. The problem in international justice is different. The prosecutor has the duty to open investigation when there are crimes committed under its jurisdiction. That's it. The problem is, at the global level, states can interfere with justice. At the national level, not. So, in the US, when Richard Nixon was trying to affect the Watergate investigation, he was removed. At the global level, the president has the right to oppose justice. And even they can instruct the CIA or State Department to do it. I remember an ambassador telling me, Luis, you have to understand, my job is to control you. So that's it. At the global level, the model is states has authority to control. And therefore, in the Bush time, Rumsfeld, who was concerned about universal jurisdiction, was putting a lot of pressure on Belgium to stop the laws authorizing judges in Belgium to do universal jurisdiction. And Obama made efforts and free a CIA guy who was indicted in Italy because he was running a CIA operation in Italy, abducting a person in Italy. And Obama just was, the guy was arrested in Panama years later, and then Obama freed him. And Donald Trump, being Trump, more extremist, he designation is like something like terrorist, you do to terrorists. Trump designated the person who replaced me, Fatou Bensouda, the new IC prosecutor, because Fatou was trying to investigate American troops in Afghanistan. So that was happening at the global level. States have authority to interfere with justice. That's why justice is not working. So UN not working because states are blocking UN. Justice, yeah.
No, sorry, that's at some point, you use a soccer metaphor, to explain this, and you say, we have a referee, but we need the players to obey the rules, right? For a match, like a good match to take place. And I think that's, a great image. And it's also that, as you say, there are tensions between the fact that leaders, they are acting in a legal sense within their prerogatives and not abusing their powers. But at the same time, that creates this fragmentation and lack of harmony at the international level.
Okay, but we're finishing the conversation. So my feeling is I was not able to convey, because yes, we focus on what I did, but I think more is what people in the audience can do. That is for me what I think I missed the opportunity. We don't discuss enough what people in this audience could do to transform, because no one else will lead, so we had to lead. But we had to lead in what we can do. There's something for me. At least I would like to understand and maybe I learned something today, how to not to present ideas, or how to present this idea to an American audience. How an American audience could understand and grasp what I'm saying, and say, okay, we can do this or that. That.
So Luis, what are your suggestions? Like what would it be? So
no,
what's
I don't
in your
know.
mind?
I think we need to know more what each of them are doing. What I'm doing now is just, I wrote a book about my experience, but I'm trying to learn how to use movies and TikTok and social media to discuss these topics. So I use Star Wars to explain the enemy or criminals impact, because in fact, in Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, the Jedi who is Samuel Jackson is going to arrest the Prime Minister Palpatine. He realizes he's a bad guy, and to arrest him, he's trying to kill him. And then Anakin, who is Darth Vader later, Lord Vader, came and stopped him. And that is the beginning of the end of the Republic and the beginning of the Galactic Empire. So George Lucas was a genius, presenting the idea very well, but no one read that. I like to present that. In Munich, a movie from Spielberg, Munich is about a Mossad leader who was killing Palestinians in retaliation of the killing in Munich Olympic. And at the end of the movie, he resigned. He left in New York. And when he's leaving, he's walking, and Spielberg show you the Twin Towers. It's trying to present the connection between this idea of kill the bad guys and the Twin Tower reaction, the September 11 reaction. So I like to connect that, the ideas with movies. In the movies, the information is there. You have Homeland, you have all these movies. So my plan now is to try to use this. That's why I'm in Los Angeles. I need to learn how to work with Hollywood to present this idea in a proper way. No, Captain America, in Captain America Civil War, you see the tension between some of the leaders are accepting to be under the UN system, others don't. And then who are the Captain America and his followers? Are there special forces? Are there independent squads? Who are they? Who are the Jedi? So I think we should. I think these movies are helping us to discuss these ideas and to mainstream them, because this should be a mainstream debate, not just expert.
Okay, and the power of movies is that they have like a very strong, symbolic effect, and they detach from the particular politics in order to distill the ideas beyond the individuals who may occlude our analytic perceptions of the issues. Luis, if you want to say anything else in closing, I'm going to share the resources that you have, like your upcoming book, also the webinars and things that you put together. And it's a great...
I would suggest, my final would be a question for the audience. If you can send me an email telling me what you advise, how to present better what I present to you in this long hour and a half. So what should be the idea I should present to reach you, to make you, it's connecting with me, it's something connecting with me. I need to know. I need to navigate between my experience and your experience to understand each other.
That's a great humanist point and communication point. Luis, it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you with us at the Conversatory on Rights Around the World. I encourage everyone to join the discussion session later, and I hope we can continue debating these issues.
I would like to do it. I think it's a failure. I did very badly today, so I like to do a second whenever you like. Please invite me again.
Oh my God, okay. It's a double honor then. Okay, there's let me tell you. Oh, I thought that there was a question. It said to Professor Ocampo, but there is no question. Can you see it there, Luis? No. But I can reach it. Oh, there. No, I don't have it. But I promise you in the discussion session, if there are these materials that you want, I'm going to provide it to you. And I would love to have a second chance to discuss with everyone in the forthcoming month.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays.
Thank you.